Primary support for Earthlings 2.0 comes from Technica Communications, an award winning PR firm amplifying breakthrough technologies of the future. Additional support comes from 24/7 Solar, a next generation concentrated solar power solution that's modular and can capture the sun's energy at a higher temperature than conventional CSP and store it in simple ceramic pellets. If you'd like to be a supporter of Earthlings 2.0, email us at lisaann@earthlingspodcast.com.
The real benefit is going to be the environmental benefits, where we're not going to have to cut down more trees or chop off more mountains to keep expanding these ever-growing highways.
Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Earthlings 2.0, the show where we imagine how we can be better versions of ourselves and build a collective future that we actually want to live in. Today, we're diving deeper into the future of autonomous urban mobility, exploring how we can address the challenges of congestion, pollution, and accessibility in our rapidly growing cities, all more sustainably. Urban areas today are home to more than 55% of the world's population, a figure projected to increase to 68% by 2050. That's according to the United Nations. This growth comes with significant challenges, as the EPA notes that the transportation sector is one of the largest contributors to direct emissions in the country. Taking these studies into account speaks to the need for more sustainable transportation. But before we bring our guests on board to discuss this topic, I'm your guest host, Luis De Leon. I'm a senior public relations account executive at the award-winning PR firm Technica Communications. But before that, I was a broadcast journalist where I contributed to award-winning projects in local news markets across the country, including Milwaukee, Austin, and Denver. Now, whether you're new to Earthlings 2.0 or a longtime listener, we are glad that you joined us. We'd really like to learn more about you and how you came across the show, so check out the show notes for a link to our listener survey and newsletter on Substack. And if you're enjoying the show, consider sharing it with someone who you think might like it. It's a simple way to help our community thrive. And thank you to Resource Labs for having us on the network. So today's Tech Spotlight features SNAAP, an acronym for Sustainable, Nonstop, Autonomous, Affordable Personalized Transportation, a company dedicated to revolutionizing urban mobility. So as the acronym suggests, SNAAP aims to provide all of that to alleviate urban congestion while minimizing environmental impact. We will leave a link in the show notes to the conceptual renderings of what SNAAP is working on, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the images yourself during the interview. But one way to describe it is think of mini monorail cars at an amusement park, with a personal shuttle perhaps taking you from point A to point B on your schedule. Now take that concept and put it in an urban center. If it sounds futuristic, it's because it is. But don't take my word for it, because our guest today is Christen Courville, President and Chief Operating Officer of SNAAP. With an extensive experience in the public sector at the intersection of technology and learning, Christen brings a wealth of knowledge in strategic partnerships, business development, and product management. Most notably, Christen spent around 15 years with Boston-based Public Consulting Group, where among other things, she managed millions of dollars worth of product development initiatives and managed global expansion efforts in Europe. So a wide range of perspective, all leading up to the mission of SNAAP. Christen, I'm so excited to talk to you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure and a joy to get to talk about SNAAP.
Let's get into some of the origins of SNAAP. We were talking before, and you were telling me a little bit about how it was your father that actually had the vision for the company. If you want to tell us how it started.
Sure, we grew up in Atlanta, and he was sitting in traffic back in the late 90s, scratching his head, going, how can we keep doing this? Just adding more lanes of traffic, sitting in more traffic. In some of the highways in Atlanta, you have MARTA going down the median, you have HOV lanes, you have buses, but the buses were empty. MARTA only goes certain places. You still have to wait for it. And he said, how are we going to solve this problem? And then he started thinking about it. And he really, after 20 plus years, kept refining his vision for SNAAP. It started off as the PT solution, which was the personal transportation solution. And the word that has always been the motivation for him is convenience. Why do we like to drive our cars? It's convenient. You get in your parking lot or your garage and you go right where you want to go when you want to go there, just like you said. And people are not going to give that up. In certain very urban areas where rapid transit is a viable option, London, New York City, Berlin, that dense population makes it more convenient to take the subway than take your car. But other than that, people, like water always goes downhill. People are always going to take the mode of transportation that is most convenient. And so that driving his vision helped really come to develop SNAAP.
Identifying a problem and then coming up with the solution. We love to see that when we talk about climate tech startups, because we always think of like sort of the collective issue around climate change, right? But then there are other inspirations in the background that help these ideas come to fruition. And so tell us from point A to point B, if you will, what the solution is, what it looks like, what you guys are working on.
So there's really three components to SNAAP. The first is the pod, which is comprised of the cockpit and then underneath the shuttle or the chassis. So that's the first item. The second is what we call the ribbonway, and that's really the track. And the reason we chose the name ribbonway is because it's very lightweight, and that's what really looks very much like a roller coaster track. It's about that wide. It is made up of fins, so it doesn't catch things. It just kind of, you can see right through it. It is different from a roller coaster track in that most roller coasters have a central pole down the middle that the cars cling onto, but we have two C channels on each side. So it looks a little bit more like a train track in that regard. And then the third component is all the software to make it all work. And that includes just what you'd think. You're going to have an app on your phone. We have a website where you have a membership, kind of like a Prime membership or Costco membership. Also like Easy Pass. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. It would be that same kind of account. And then we also have just the administration system to really manage all the pods and all the trips that people are going to be taking. And the fourth piece of this really is the solar component. Imagine a solar farm, but now imagine a linear solar farm. The way that we've designed the ribbonway is it can also hold solar panels, and so it would just be a very long linear solar farm. The power we capture can go right back into the system. If we have excess power, it can feed back into the grid. Some of the numbers we've worked through makes it look like in the end, we won't be a transportation company. We might be an infrastructure company, but we could just become a power company.
I was going to say, because it would take a lot of, I would imagine, urban planning, strategic partnerships, and infrastructure on its own to help achieve this vision. So, where are you guys right now as far as how far along you are to making the vision a reality? What is the status here of what you're able to share right now for SNAAP and where you guys are at?
Our first phase has really been focused on developing a test and demonstration system. Everybody wants to say, okay, well, where have you implemented this? We want to come, we want to see it, we want to take a ride. So we have been very fortunate here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to partner with UTC, which is the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga. And they have a facility called the Advanced Vehicle Test Facility that was originally developed in collaboration with a couple other partners to test buses, electric buses. And it hasn't been used a lot recently. So we now have built our test track out there. So we have a modified, simplified kind of ribbonway. It is full scale. And now we have the pod and the shuttle, and we are starting to test everything. And so much of our timeline has really been a money line. We have been a very small startup intentionally in some ways to really bootstrap this. Other people in this market have taken a marketing first approach, and we've really tried to take a product first approach where we want to make sure that we have our ducks in a row, it's working, and we know it works before we get the marketing too far out there. So in our money line, we have been trying to look for investors that can support that without getting too big too fast in some ways.
That sort of makes sense too, because we always, that is a talker of a story in any local news market of a proposal happening for this type of new and innovative public transit, right? But to your point there, the marketing's already out there and they're going full scale with it, but we have often seen that different things don't come to fruition. from small projects to big projects. We know in California that it's been years and years of them trying to build that a train stretching across the state. We know that there's been the ideas of hyperloop tunnels in the Austin area and other places. And we can go on down the list, right? So people listening to this might think that's a lot of infrastructure and planning to make this a reality. What makes you believe that this can be? How different is this from those other ideas?
There have been other players in this space. Um, One of them, or many of them, have lost focus on being personal. And technically, I guess personal rapid transit is anything up to 20 people. That doesn't feel very personal to me. So I think that's a big differentiator, that we've stayed focused on personal. The other thing we've really learned is the track needs to be passive. One of the reasons cars have been so ubiquitous is your car does all the driving and the road just sits there. And we want our track to be passive. I don't know how much you know about train tracks, but they're not passive. They have somebody to be switching them. And so one of the real innovations we've come up with is a way for the pod to switch itself and take turns on the track if it goes straight, left, or right. So that's been kind of exciting and will allow us to have an autonomous vehicle on a passive track. So here in Chattanooga, one of the things that everybody's always been talking about is how do we get a high-speed rail to connect Chattanooga down to the Atlanta airport? The same conversation has been happening from Richmond, Virginia, where I live, up to DC. I mean, I think we can all imagine those scenarios. And here in Chattanooga, to get to Atlanta, it's basically straight down Highway 75. And so everyone gets together and, oh, this is a great idea. Every single person wants to do it. But then they start saying, well, if it comes through our city, then we want to stop. And then if it comes through our city, we want to stop there. So all of a sudden, a high-speed rail that goes from point A to point B is no longer the express train. It becomes the local, and everybody wants to stop. And so instead of taking, 45 minutes or an hour, you're back to 2 or 3 hours. And with SNAAP, that's the difference. If you think about it, the train I just described, every extra stop it has slows it down. For SNAAP, every extra station we have is actually more efficient, because you don't have to stop where I want to stop or the next person wants to stop. I can get on at any point and I can get off at any point. And so the goal is to take me to my destination, which might, and the closer the stop is to my final destination, the more efficient it is. So I think that having those individual pods really is going to be what makes it convenient.
And so for those individual pods, would they literally be individual? So like one person in that compartment?
That's right.
Do you see that as maybe a challenge for some folks? Like what if you have like 100 people like lining up wanting to get on it, like the all wanting to commute to the Atlanta area? There's a lot of companies based in both spots. I'm sure vice versa, Atlanta to Chattanooga. Is that something y'all have considered basically?
No, I think it's a good question, and we get it all the time. And if that was really what people wanted, then van pools would be much more popular, and they're not. People want to get in their car when they're ready and go. 80% of the cars on the road right now have one person in them. So our signature single pod is really what our focus is. And the secondary benefit to that isn't just the convenience, but it also allows us to stay very lightweight. So when somebody says infrastructure, it sounds heavy and big and expensive and a long timeline. But with our ribbonway, it's very, very lightweight, and we don't have to overbuild it to compensate for or to allow for an 18-wheeler to go on it at some point, or even a larger vehicle of 10 people or 16 or 20. We can really stay focused on one person pods. The maximum whole weight that we're planning for is about 1,500 pounds. That includes the whole shuttle, the passenger, luggage, etc. And that allows our infrastructure to be very lightweight, very non-traditional.
So we have the ribbonway. Would there be multiple pods on this ribbonway? How many could there be? I know that that's probably still far out because obviously you're still in the testing stage, but what are you able to elaborate on sort of the concept there?
Sure, we've done some preliminary modeling, and we can have a pod every 10 to 30 feet. So if it's a popular time of day, we can just pack them on there. and they can go very fast in a small space when you're not going very far. Maybe they'd be going 10 to 20 or 30 miles an hour, but with no stops, that's faster than you could drive there. But on a connection between Chattanooga and Atlanta, we could be going 70, 80, 90 miles, 100 miles an hour. Again, we might have to get there, but there's no reason we couldn't do that.
So they're self-driving, but it's one direction. Can you expand a little bit more on the tech there?
Yeah, absolutely. They are fully autonomous electric vehicles. Everybody knows what those are now these days. And I think that's one of the neat things that's happened to the market since my dad first started trying to figure out how to solve this problem, is so much of the technology is caught up. Battery technology is improved, just the market. People are just more aware of, EVs, autonomous. I can just call Uber. Why do I need to drive my car? Waze knows where I'm going. But the challenge with so much of autonomous, and you'll certainly, in the podcast land, you'll hear different opinions on this. I think it's very unlikely we'll ever get to level 5 autonomous out on the roads. I think computers can solve a lot of that, but really autonomous level 5 is going to require an ecosystem like ours that's really separate. There's certainly going to be some things we'll have to anticipate, a bird or a tree falling on the ribbonway. I mean, there's definitely going to be a few things, but it'll be much, much more realistic when we have the ribbonway and total control over that ecosystem.
I was gonna say that leads to another sort of like point of skepticism, right? That I'm sure that you deal with those headwinds, as any does, and that is the keywords of autonomous and self-driving. They don't always have the most positive sentiment attached to them, especially right now. If we see one self-driving car accident, it's going to make the headlines everywhere. It just as any other sort of like transportation accident or incident. How do you sort of explain that to people that are interested in this idea and the concept? How do you cut through that?
So a couple ways. One is a funny story I like to say is, what if I was pitching cars to you? What if we didn't have cars? And I'm going to suggest that we're going to take an internal combustion engine and a big gas tank with really flammable gas, and we're going to put it on 4 wheels, and we're going to let you drive 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. We're going to make some dashed marks out of paint on this big superhighway to keep you in your lane. And then we're going to let 16-year-olds drive next to giant 18-wheelers. And we're going to call that a great transportation system. But the reason we allow our car system to work is because it serves a need, it serves a function. And so that's my kind of funny answer. And then our lead engineer that came into the company after my dad died 2 years ago, he comes from the aeronautic space. And so he is used to very, very high safety standards. And so he's done a great job really bringing that sensitivity to our development. So every time he says, he's like, oh, but we can do this on the ground. This will be much easier, because he's always trying to think about doing it in the air. So and there are an awful lot of safety standards out there for fire, ventilation, that we've been trying to follow, even though there aren't really safety standards that apply specifically to this type of transportation. We're trying not to be paralyzed by trying to be overly cautious at this point, very safety conscious, but we want to get it together, and then those safety things will continue to develop as we go.
How does SNAAP ensure that its services are user-friendly and accessible to a diverse population in the concept of like putting this in an urban center, right? Because we know that there's going to be different groups of people, different people with socioeconomic backgrounds.
So I'm going to answer your question 2 ways. First is, when we were talking with a transportation engineer in one of these cities recently, he was so excited to hear about SNAAP, because he has been trying to solve some of these transportation issues that you just mentioned for years. And there were no good options. It's buses or bike lanes, or we can time the traffic signals differently. And he was so excited to really see something that was in the right layer. If you think of transportation as different layers, you've got cars, you have subways, you have airplanes, but there wasn't another good option in the car layer. So he was very excited that we were offering something that could really be innovative. As far as connecting people to it, it's lower cost than having a car. So just imagine the expense of having a car. You need to pay for parking, you need to buy the car, you need to pay for insurance, you need to get a license, which can be a real challenge if you have DUIs, if you've had accidents, if you're losing your eyesight. So there's a lot of barriers to even just getting your license. And so what we can do with SNAAP is you have a membership fee. It's 25 cents a mile. So it's very low cost. Somebody else can sponsor your membership if your job needs you to get there. I had a friend that used to work at Goodwill, and they do a lot of economic development and workforce development. And they did this study where they gave people Uber vouchers to get to work. People getting to work on time and consistently is a huge challenge for that population. When they had access to transportation through these Uber vouchers, no missed days, no late days, amazing, performance at work. Transportation is what is the barrier for so many people to be fully functional and fully part of our economic environment.
I guess that also goes back to the need for like collaboration. Strategic partnerships are going to be key. I would imagine then, based off like an example like that, you know, no one knows these communities better than the nonprofits that serve them as well, and like some of the key players and local groups that help those communities. I would imagine then that's something that you're continuing to touch base with them, or if that's something in mind for the future as the idea continues to develop into what it could become.
The partners we're really looking to work with are future builders and local problem solvers. Now, these could be governments, but we think most likely they're going to be business owners, developers, large companies. So Volkswagen's North American headquarters are here in Chattanooga. They have a huge manufacturing facility. It's a big challenge for them to get employees to work because they live in outlying communities. And even when they get to work, their parking lots are so big that they have trouble getting people into the buildings. And I'm sure that's just one example. Omaha, Nebraska, we've had conversations with, they've had similar challenges. So it's the employers, the employees that are going to really be our partners. And the way that we are approaching this is through a franchise model. We want these future builders, these local problem solvers to be our franchisees so that they would own, they would operate, they would really help us figure out what problems they need to solve, whether it's customers or employees or.
Say you partnered with a big Fortune 500 company that has their headquarters somewhere, but then the urban center that is located near, that's where the crux of their employees work. Is that sort of the way that you're seeing this scale?
Yeah, I think it's going to scale pretty organically once we get a backbone in place. And that whether that's for a Fortune 500 company, whether it's for a university, whether it's for a big sports venue or entertainment venue, maybe it's like a Sun City, or maybe even like a national park, like Acadia National Park has a terrible problem with traffic and parking. People want to come, but they can't get there. And you want to go someplace to see beautiful nature and have it be quiet, and there's just cars everywhere. So I think there's a lot of different ways it could grow. Connecting an airport to a downtown area is something we've talked to several different cities about.
Do you ever see this also as like an option of like suburb to suburb, or like focus heavily on urban centers? I think that's where you're going though, with the point of saying you need to identify which city has a particular problem. How can the SNAAP concept address that problem?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the really nice benefits of having a franchise model is we don't have to be experts on every city. The people who live there are going to know that. My parents also lived in Roswell. I grew up there, but then I lived downtown for a long time. And my mom would say, well, when do you want to come to dinner? And I said, well, I can come at 4 o'clock or I can come at 8 o'clock. And it will take a while for the infrastructure, for the ribbonway to kind of become that ubiquitous. Maybe it won't ever become that ubiquitous. We don't know that this is going to be solve everybody's problem everywhere, but it could. And, it could come into your garage someday. My kids are like, why can't I just take SNAAP? It would be so much easier to get to school or to get to wherever they're going.
I think it goes without saying that obviously this model looks to be a more sustainable way of transportation, obviously. But what are some of the different foundations there for what makes this also tackle the problem of clean transportation in an effort to reduce greenhouse gases and continue to combat climate change?
Yeah, I think greenhouse gas limitation is certainly part of it. Big fan of solar. My dad was always very into solar back in the 70s. I did a big high school science fair project on solar. It's pretty amazing. And if we can capture enough power with the linear solar farm that SNAAP could provide the infrastructure for, that would be great. But to me, in some ways, the real benefit is going to be the environmental benefits, where we're not going to have to cut down more trees or chop off more mountains to keep expanding these ever-growing highways. And we can turn parking lots back into parks. We can turn, highways back into greenways, or at least not keep expanding them further and further. I think we could use a lot of the rights of way where we have power lines could become transportation corridors in addition to having power lines.
How do you see the next 5 to 10 years in the space? And what do you feel needs to happen in order to sort of either scale your model or just scale clean transportation as a whole?
So one of the barriers we've had is finding the right investors. We're not coming up with a web app. We're not coming up with something you can sell on QVC. This is a huge, audacious system that we're coming up with. And it's hard to find the right investors who have that kind of timeline and that kind of vision. So that's been one of our biggest barriers. And then I think the other barrier is coming up with a culture or a business climate that's willing to take risks. The US has gotten very hesitant. There's so much bad press if somebody invests a lot of money and it doesn't work. And I think that's why governments are especially risk adverse. And that's why we're looking to the private market to really be able and willing to take those risks. Regardless of what administrations in Washington, I think the market doesn't change. People still need a solution to transportation and traffic. Who is not tired of traffic? Who is not aware that this is a huge problem we're having? I think the environmental benefits in some ways are a side effect, a side benefit. I think the biggest impact is going to be people's time and inconvenience.
Well, I'm excited to continue to see how this plays out, especially in the testing stage as well, because that's really exciting, the fact that you're able to get that far, because sometimes these ideas don't even get to a point where they're able to, say, partner with a reputable university in order to not only test the technology, but also lean into the research that the university is conducting as well.
Yep, definitely.
Super insightful stuff. I'm really excited to see how this all plays out, Christen. And thank you so much again for taking the time this afternoon to tell us more about SNAAP and the future of sustainable transportation. And thank you, Earthlings, for joining us once again. We will see you on another turn of this beautiful blue-green space flower that we call home.
Primary financial and production support for Earthlings 2.0 comes from Technica Communications, an award-winning PR firm amplifying breakthrough technologies of the future. Additional supporters include Greenlane, who is working to build a nationwide network of commercial EV charging infrastructure; Tigo Energy, a solar energy and software solutions provider focusing on commercial, industrial, and residential solar installations; Ampion, who is expanding renewable energy access for communities and Fortune 500 companies everywhere through community solar; 24/7 Solar, a next-generation concentrated solar power solution that's modular and can capture the sun's energy at a higher temperature than conventional CSP and store it in simple ceramic pellets; and the U.S. Biochar Initiative, who is increasing production and use of biochar in North America by developing markets, increasing awareness, and building community. And of course, our heartfelt gratitude goes out to you, our listeners, for your curiosity and dedication and showing up with us every week. Thank you so much. We do this for you. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover, or if you want to participate in our Pay It Forward guest model, please contact me at lisaann@earthlingspodcast.com. And you can search our entire archive on any podcast app as well as YouTube. And you can also go to earthlingspodcast.com and search our website there. Until next time, keep exploring and caring for this beautiful blue-green space flower that we call home.